This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea to the meaning of the word?
Hello.
Hello.
It's lonely in here today.
It's Friday.
Friday's mindset.
There's a song, right?
It's a song, bro. Let's see here. You would have been, oh shoot, you'd have been like 15 years old then.
The Rebecca Black song? Isn't that who sang it?
Yeah.
I remember when that came out.
Y'all are probably the same age. I see you rolling in that convertible with her.
I do have a 2-door.
Do you have a convertible?
No, I didn't want a convertible because I lived in a place where there was hail. And also it just seemed like a hassle.
Hell yeah. Sorry. I had a 2001 convertible. It was hella used. And everybody's like, no, don't do that. Like, it's going to leak. The top's going to leak. And I was like, no, they know how to make cars. They do not. I went through a car wash one time and like water was pouring in. And I was like, this is hell. I hate this. So.
Brooke sent me a video of some lady power washing her car and opens the door and starts power washing the whole console and the seats and everything inside the car.
Oh,
and I was like, oh no.
Are y'all in the power washing porn subreddit?
Oh, yeah, obviously.
It's so good.
It's a requirement for Reddit.
I kind of want to get into power washing.
I do too, but I've done a lot of power washing in my life, and I know that it's fun for exactly 1 minute.
Sure.
The setup sucks and the teardown sucks, and it's just boring. So, but it looks fun. It's fun to watch the short versions of it.
Yeah. The 3-second clip.
Yeah.
After. It is frustrating when somebody posts the after picture before the before picture.
Yes.
Spoils the surprise.
It's a semantic thing, but it matters.
Yeah. I'm off the rails this week.
He's tilted.
I woke up all snotty because it was like 80 degrees one day and it's 30 degrees another.
It snowed here last night after it was 80 degrees a few days ago.
We had a interesting last couple of weeks at Podia we could talk about.
We did. I was there. For y'all listening, if you have missed any episodes, I am there now.
And Andrew and I see each other like once or twice a day for a few hours. It's good.
Yeah. When I don't, I feel sad.
We have a creator, I guess it's public now, Harry Connick Jr. He is a musician, started selling a course on Podia. And we did just kind of some preparation work, testing high traffic, things like that. And that was a really interesting discovery for me. The first thing we tried to emulate was our checkout, and we can't really emulate paid orders in how we load test our staging apps because they don't use live Stripe. They use live Stripe credentials, so we can't put real cards in. So at first we were like, well, let's just sleep for 10 seconds. But Andrea and I paired for a little bit, and I think the problem with that is that sleep blocks any other like IO from happening on that thread. Whereas the Stripe, though the request may take a while, it's usually tinier Stripe request. And it also makes room for other like database requests to like beat another Stripe request to it. So that was the first thing that was interesting to me. We brought that down to like random sleep between half a second and 3 seconds. I thought that was pretty good. But we still had a problem where as we increased the amount of virtual users, we never like brought it down. But like we saw response times keep getting higher. I'm talking massive amounts of traffic. And Andrea had the idea, there's a query, a SQL query she learned about that will show you locking rows and stuff like that. And we looked at that and we had bukus. We're familiar with that term now, right? Locked requests. Did that happen at Podia or on here?
Is that
no, that happened at Podia. I just
never mind.
realized, yeah. We didn't know what that word was. I didn't know what that word was.
Is that the metric measurement?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what they use outside of freedom units. So anyway, I don't know. It was fascinating. And it was all the same kind of query. It was all updating a timestamp on a record. And it was like, oh, that's probably a touch. And so sure enough, 11 characters, let's see here, comma space TOUCH colon space TRUE. So 13 characters. Sorry, Andrew. 13 characters were like hammering the database. we didn't even need the touch anymore. It was for old caching. We pulled it out and the request times, even at this really high load, just plummeted. It was amazing. So that was my experience.
It's funny how something that simple can affect so much. You can think that, yeah, it's not going to hurt anything. We'll add this. But if you're not paying attention to it, a little change like that can make a wild difference.
Yeah. And I mean, what is it? The sharp knives thing? That's what it felt like. It was fascinating because like, I'm talking like massive scale I was pushing at it. So it's not a problem we encounter day to day. We even have lots of like headroom still, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of nice to like push the system and see what kind of needed improvement. And like, that was a quick win. And every load test I ran after that was just pretty constant.
You really brought me back to some nostalgia talking about this though. For whatever reason, it reminded me of my first Rails job, full-time Rails job. We ended up doing work for marketing agencies all the time. And one of the projects we did, I don't even know if we did it in Rails. Probably did. It was mostly static pages. It was for 901 Tequila, which is coming out in 2000, whenever.
That's a Memphis tequila.
Is it? Because
Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
901's our area code. That's what it was named after. Justin Timberlake's from Memphis.
Yeah. We ended up building the website for that when it launched. I remember us sitting there like, it's 5 of us at this little agency. And we're building this and we're like getting pretty hyped up about it. We're building Justin Timberlake's website. This is so cool. He's going to tweet about it. He's got however many million followers. And so we did a bunch of load testing and whatever. And then he doesn't even tweet about it on launch day. We were so prepared for all this. And then literally nothing happened. We're like, well, that was fun, but also super disappointing. That's kind of wild that I got to work on that. Such a random little project.
Those projects are cool. I love stuff like that. The tool we used was called K6.io, and it was awesome. It is basically a node script you write. And so they have a browser extension. And when I say browser extension, they have a Chrome extension that will let you click through a site and like it will write the script for you. And so when you like do keystrokes, it's not recording those. All it's recording is the HTTP requests and how long you sleep between the next one. So if I'm filling out a form, it's not necessarily doing that, but it knows when I submit the form, what to post with the form alongside it. So the sleep is really just emulating a user in between.
Run the post request instead of actually building up a Chrome instance and visiting the page and whatever, which would be running system tests, which wouldn't be very scalable to go do. But, lots of post requests, not a problem.
I don't know. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I like the data part of it. And I learned a lot and it was a good week.
How does that work with the authenticity tokens on forms though? Because doesn't Rails automatically generate those?
Oh yeah. I should mention I had to bypass CSRF, but it was not staging. It's not a staging app. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes more sense then. I was like, wait, how would that work? Okay, but that makes more sense.
There were a lot of subtleties and our production instance on Heroku has a lot of like environment variables that I had to manually bring over. Things like not only Sidekick settings, but we use PG Bouncer. And so I had to make sure we had a database pool, and we do in staging, but I had to bring over the database pool URL in order for it to be accessed, things like that. Just little things.
Did you make sure you're using the equivalent dynos as production and all those little other things that you have to worry about too?
Yeah, fired up. A lot of dynos fired up. Some expensive databases for staging and had a ball and can't wait for the Heroku bill to come in next month.
I was going to say, Spencer's wallet's going to be hurting.
It's kind of a running joke because Heroku will email everyone on the account the bill. So we all get the bill every month, and it's always a little bit of panic. My bill's like $20 and the Podia bill is not $20. And so,
yeah. Were there other things that you had to think about when you were doing the load testing and like, does it produces metrics and stuff for you and you use those mostly?
Yeah, it has a graph of the number of like virtual users it's sending, the requests per second that are getting through, there's average response time. It tells you the P95 response time, the minimum response time, the maximum response time.
On that note of response time and stuff, is that running from the same region or is that spread out across multiple regions? And that's another factor in all this, of course.
Right. K6 supports multiple regions. I only use a single region in Virginia, I think. What's cool about K6 though is you can define multiple scenarios to run parallel. So I was testing how many visits can a Podia storefront get while people are also making purchases, stuff like that. And they ran in parallel. So you could take every HTTP request for each scenario and look at it, or just look at the scenario itself and get the metrics for the overall scenario. Purchasing a product was like 8 HTTP requests. And so I could see the overall of that, or I could dig down at each one and see kind of where things fluctuate.
Cool. Yeah, this is something that I think, I don't know. I mean, people do it in Rails, but there's not a simple, like straightforward de facto, follow this tutorial and go do this and worry about these things. It probably does at some level end up being kind of unique to your situation or whatever, but it seems like it'd be nice to have you should write a tutorial or give a talk or something on it.
A TED talk.
Theodore talk.
Theodore. Jamie, our CTO, was the one who told me about K6. I think he heard about it maybe in Nate Berkopek's Slack for the Rails performance stuff. And so it's a cool tool. Other things to think about, we use rack timeout, and all these requests are coming from the same general IP addresses. So I had to like just completely disable it to get it to like even go at this kind of scale.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess generally the customers are going to be from all random IP addresses, but yeah, probably not something you have to worry about for large traffic like that.
Yeah. And there's a certain threshold like per storefront too, based on the host. So like if it's getting massive amounts per second, like there's a threshold for that. So like first I expanded it and then I hit another rack timeout issue and I expanded that. And then I had another one. And so then I just disabled it like a pro.
Just turn off the test suite and move on.
I don't know. It was cool. Like you spend years writing features and writing bugs, and to kind of step back and, I don't know, push against the thing you've been able to contribute to for years was kind of fun.
Yeah. Drag race it a little bit.
Yeah. And take out the fancy car. I'm not going to take my Honda minivan on the track. I'm going to take out a Ferrari of Heroku dynos and Redis instances and put the pedal to the metal.
Do you think something like that, like the larger your application gets, like a Podia, right? You've got to eventually, this just needs to be a standard thing. You have to always think about performance at a certain size and scale of your application. So is that something that you think you will end up making part of the like developer workflow? It's not necessarily something you just stuff in CI and run some performance tests during CI, but you could do some sort of little quick benchmarks in there. But also maybe I was curious if you guys had thought about once a month or something, we run performance tests and make sure that there's no regressions or whatever, and kind of just track that generally, kind of like you do with CI. I was kind of curious if you had thought about that. Like, because at first it's like right now where we expect some traffic from Black Friday. We do some performance testing. We don't come back to it until next Black Friday. I can imagine at a certain point, you're like, let's just generally always keep an eye on this as kind of a thing that you end up doing.
We haven't talked about that, but by the time this episode comes out, I will now have talked to Jamie about that. It is interesting. So this tool will actually let you schedule tests. And so you can define multiple different scenarios, multiple different tests that have their own scenarios and schedule them. And so it would be something we could do. The thing is, we would probably have to keep an app running to do that against. But yeah, I mean, we could programmatically with Heroku spin that up and spin that down if we really wanted to. So that's interesting.
You don't have to do all of that though to also start noticing which of all those controllers are getting hit. We can add performance testing to that. I mean, there's tons of gems out there that will do stuff like that.
And we use Scout for monitoring. So we could use that to identify some points like that and write K6 tests for that. Because that's the other thing is right now is a pretty, compared to all the features Podia has, it's a very minimal test we're running. It's probably one of the higher impact ones because it's customer facing, but it's interesting. And yeah, we learned a lot and I hope we keep building on it.
I could imagine you go through and write a GitHub action that runs a bunch of benchmarks and uploads them somewhere like once a day or once a week or something and just keep a constant thing like that going. Or if K6 can do it against your staging environment or whatever. But both of those might be useful. Either option could be better than the other or whatever. But it does seem like one of those where you're like, hey, at this point, the application's huge and it's hard to keep an eye on. Jason added a touch and killed performance again.
It was me that added it 4 years ago. I'd get blamed it. And I was like, gosh.
That meme where like pull off the Spider-Man mask. But yeah, like it just seems like a really good point of like a lot of applications get to that point where the product needs, just like your tests need to pass, you just also need to keep track of performance the same way. And I don't see a whole lot of people talking about setting up an automated system for that. And it just kind of crossed my mind as, yeah, why wouldn't you want to do that? It makes perfect sense. And maybe you can set up benchmarks in a script that you run on a schedule or whatever. And lots of ways you could shave that yak, but it seems like a useful thing.
Yeah, definitely. There's something there. The tool we use too is really cool. It did have a learning curve though, because there's different types of approaches you can take. There's a ramp up, or there's just constant, or there's kind of fluctuating, and pulling the right levers was difficult at first. I finally just went with the like, okay, when you turn on, just send X number of virtual users that way.
Right. You never know. It depends on how the launch goes or whatever. You could open up the Black Friday sales page and not tell anybody about it or whatever and have a ramp up. But you could also have someone email 100,000 people in their email list and get 20,000 people clicking a link to go to your site on Black Friday. And you're going to have more like that constant crazy amount of traffic over that weekend, I would imagine.
We already have that, like not Black Friday, because we do email from the app. We let creators send email to their students. And so, yeah, it's not uncommon. That is where Rails Autoscale is also really useful for us. Andrea and I, when we were trying to trace down where things were kind of starting to back up at, we actually installed the free Rails Autoscale. We didn't use it for the scaling. We just wanted to know what the queue times were. It was like a really accurate way to measure it for us because we use Autoscale in production. It wasn't the queue. It wasn't the server. And that's when we realized, that's when Andrea was like, why don't we check the database? But how? So here we are.
Do you keep an eye on query times and stuff with the Heroku Postgres dashboard or PG Hero or something like that?
We mostly use the Heroku dashboard for that because it's got pretty good metrics. I saw a tool the other day that tries to recreate that. It's an open source package. It does that for Rails apps that aren't on Heroku.
That's cool. I think they do the same kind of query, their Postgres thing set up so it records all the queries and the times PG Hero has you set up or whatever. Because it's not enabled by default, I think. So you got to go like enable that, and then you can just get stats, which is awesome because you can be running a lot of code for a long time and realize, I never indexed that email column that I should have. That is really, really useful when you're like running stuff and performance is fine until it's not. And then you spy those things and you're like, why didn't I do that sooner? Could have added an index and been lightning fast months ago. But I do find that super useful.
What you said, performance is fast until it's not. It's exactly the issue we got ahead with by load testing.
Yeah.
Was that because we were doing absurd scale, right? We were a ways from that. And so, yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
You need to be prepared for it. And a lot of times people aren't. And that's okay. And then you like run into I don't know why, but there's 100 people on my site all at once doing some crazy query that's really slow. And then now you're panicked because it's 500 airing for people and whatever. That stuff's not fun. But luckily, you can be in those situations if you expect the traffic to go up considerably and you can do it ahead of time. That's good. But then also it makes me think about, why don't I just work that into my regular old workflow like I do with running tests in CI? Like, it would be nice just to always have an eye on performance. It reminded me of, if you guys watched that talk that Gary Bernhardt did about and text editor, where he was like creating, it's so good. We'll have to find a link to it, but he, during his talk, is creating a text editor, and it's not a real text editor, but it's one where he's imagining what a text editor could do. And I watched that and was really inspired with a lot of that. Where like, if we can see this stuff in Scout and App Signal and Skylight and whatever, Honey Badger, it'd be so sweet because they have the stack traces and they show you where errors came from and where performance stuff was slow, like a database query. How cool would it be to integrate with your editor that could highlight lines of code and mark them as red, or like this generated errors or this was slow, and have that context while you're writing code? How sweet would that be? You wouldn't want it on all the time, but being able to like have your text editor analyze the code and give you context like that be really cool. And or even just to have something where it's like, hey, you got 3 nested for loops. That's going to be a lot more Ruby CPU usage here than maybe it should be, or something. Or I don't know, you do a model.all instead of a find each and have your text editor. Just want to let you know that might not be a great idea if you got 10 million records.
Do you integrate your apps with third parties like Stripe, GitHub, Slack, or Trello? If you want quality webhooks, like Stripe's for example, that's more than just sending a JSON payload to your customer's URL and calling it a day, right? That's where Hook Relay comes in. Hook Relay is a service that makes sending and receiving webhooks reliable, secure, and transparent, automatically. Some may even say magically. Users are amazed at the visibility they've gained into their webhooks. Without Hook Relay, you have no idea how many requests you're processing. With Hook Relay, you can watch your traffic, inspect each request, and much more. It's like X-ray vision. If your app or your integration partners are being flaky, you'll love the peace of mind that comes with knowing that no matter what happens, Hook Relay will make sure that your webhooks are delivered. Skip days of grunt work rolling your own webhook system and get reliable webhooks for your app in minutes, not days. Go to hookrelay.dev to get started and check webhooks off your to-do list. That's hookrelay.dev, all one word.
Kevin Newton, if you're still listening after being on last week, we're excited to see that tool you built for Ruby and
Yes.
That was a fun episode. I feel like the last few, I mean, they're all fun, but I feel like the last few just really engaged me with, I don't know, programming as a whole.
Yeah, good conversations lately. I miss this stuff. Like, I feel like we used to have a lot of conversations when I was in school doing computer science and just random stuff like that. But the podcast is a great way to continue doing that, because mostly it's just me alone or me and Colin hanging out, working on something. But I don't have enough coworkers, so we'll have to grow the Go Rails team.
Just hire me and Andrew. I feel like Andrew and I, as a unit, have been evolving. We're getting a real back and forth going, and I really enjoy it. Look forward to it.
You guys will interview at companies as a pair,
like in Step Brothers. Hello, Miss Lady.
I haven't seen that movie in so long. The real question is, which one are we?
I play drums, so I guess I would be Dale.
I'm the other one.
I feel like physically it should be reversed by appearance, but 2 of my Funko Pops are Dale and Brennan. One is holding a sword and the other one's holding drumsticks. I love when we just ruin this podcast like this. The other thing I did want to talk about, so when this airs, I will either have given my Sin City Ruby talk or will be a few hours away from giving my Sin City Ruby talk. So we could talk about some of that if anyone's interested.
Yeah, the secrets.
Okay, so 4 episodes ago, when Andrew and I let loose on the Twitters, one of the questions was my Sin City Ruby talking to me about, and it was going to be about simplicity. Let me tell you, every person, 6 people, I'm like, they're like, what you talking about? I'm like, I'm talking about simplicity and how it applies to programming and how everything is kind of subjective. And they're like, okay. Never once was somebody like, oh, cool. Or like, that sounds awesome. It was always, okay. So I started working on that talk and that kept rolling in my head. And I was like, I'm not ready for this shit. I need 10 more years before I get this talk. So I'm giving a talk on SQL and active record. And I was so good. And I'm so angry and so triggered all at the same time. Colleen, who's one of the other speakers, she's building a query builder for Rails. It's like part of hammerstone.dev. And they're building a query builder that's for Laravel and Rails. And so I talked to her about this, and she's actually giving a talk, if I'm not mistaken, around like Arrow and stuff. Our talks should complement each other really well, because mine will be more like the SQL side of things and how you can use certain gems or certain active record features. But I tend to avoid talking about Arrow because I don't understand it, because I'm not very good at Arrow. But I'm looking forward to her talk to learn more about that.
That'll be good. I mean, I think that is a recurring thing of just people want to understand SQL better. And it can be really just daunting to think about this extra level over top of SQL and ARL in between active record and SQL. It's this weird thing that exists, but you never, if you're using Rails normally, you're not usually going to interact with it at all, or even may never even know it exists. Like people may be listening and be like, what is that?
Is it ARL? ARL?
It's ARL. I promise it's ARL.
ARL it is. I mean, that makes sense.
Whatever. It's irrelevant.
All right. That Chris has been on it today.
Yeah, this is good. Like 30 minutes before this call, Andrew and I and Seb, our coworker, were looking at some SQL that we had to do at Podia. There was just no good way to make it anything but SQL because it's so complex. It's encapsulated in a Ruby class that has a call method, but from there it's just SQL and sanitation, stuff like that.
I was quaking looking at that query.
But doing that kind of stuff is the stuff I want to talk about. I don't see a lot of people talk about that stuff specifically, and I've had to do that at my last 2 jobs, a lot of more SQL heavy. So yeah, my talk's about things like, I don't know, premise is about taking maybe, okay, we talked about this earlier with Rails kind of gives you the sharp knife, saying like with touch. Touch is a really good example because it's something that's really simple, but they can have kind of big effects if you're not careful. And I think about other things that Rails gives us in relation to like active record that are like that. Like validations, yeah, like they're great, except that they can be bypassed by using update all, insert all. There's certain methods you can actually just call update with validate false. I think there are ways to enforce validation at the database level that can prevent problems in the app. So not necessarily like don't use active record validations, but like if you really want to make sure something is not null or not blank, enforce that at the database. So when somebody is manually adding a SQL record, it doesn't slip by, and then you get a honey badger error. And you're like, why are we here? So stuff like that, materialized views, common table expressions. I don't know, just things like that I've gotten to use. People have taught me, and I just want to package that up and see if it helps someone else.
Yeah, but it's a good one. Like all the tutorials are going to be something really basic with active record and have simple associations and things. But the reality is any complex application is going to have models that need some crazy joins. So you got to go do a sub select in order to get what you need from one table. And there's a lot that you don't find in tutorials, because also a tutorial is going to have to go set up a whole ton of models and dependencies and things before you can even begin to start to show and teach that stuff. So it's not like those are easy to make. So I think it's a really good one to be able to talk about and have some examples. And I'd love to see more of that stuff. It's a really good topic, I think, that is naturally just hard to explain, to teach, to actually do in the day job. So it's a good one.
I had freaking geniuses teach me SQL, stuff that I still don't fully understand. I've been taught, especially my last job. And so, yeah, I think it's cool to talk about. Plus, I'm still wanting to build an active record course. And so I think this is kind of a good way to get my thoughts together and like hopefully talk to some people at Sin City Ruby about the talk and about SQL and be like, hey, or active record, and be like, what are some gaps here between what I talked about and what you're thinking and stuff like that. So
Yeah, are you gonna do the same thing for RailsConf keynote?
yeah. Opening slot, baby.
So it was hilarious when I went to Ruby Midwest, the first conference I think I ever been to. I was in school and went out there in Kansas City, and I think the second talk of the day was about eigen classes and stuff. And I'm like a brand new Ruby developer who mostly knows Python. And it was 9:30 and I had a headache from trying to understand this through the rest of the day. And I was like, that's not a great talk for the beginning of the day.
Oh, that sounds heavy. It sounds like a big meal.
I remember there was some flowchart graph that was just lines and boxes and stuff everywhere explaining the structure of stuff. And I was like, what in the hell is going on? I like very clearly remember that talk for whatever reason, because it was just it was a deep topic for a brand new Ruby developer, I'll say. Did you guys submit talks for RailsConf?
No.
Oh, you did, Andrew. You just found out this week.
Oh, that's right. I did. But Jason alerted me that I did.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Hopefully in 2 weeks we'll know. But yeah, I submitted a talk on behalf of all three of us. I did talk to Chris about it before I did it.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
No, I understand. That's fine.
We already knew you're going to be there regardless. So
yeah, I'm down.
You're always down
to party.
I did decide to submit a talk that I am quite convinced probably won't get in because I wrote it like
Laravel, isn't it?
Yeah. It's called Leaving Rails for the Promised Land. No, I wrote it 6 hours before the deadline. So I wasn't going to submit, and then I got kind of some FOMO. And
sounds like my college essays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You?
I did. I'm hoping we find out soon. I don't know how long of a timeline it takes for them to review stuff, but it's always so funny to see that graph of submissions. There are those super eager people who submit the first day that the talks are open, and then the last day they're like, 100 in a single day.
Yeah, it's the procrastination station. Although I do feel bad for the organizers because they can review them as they get submitted. So like as the initial ones are coming in, they can review those and start that process. But all of a sudden they get piled on at the very end and then they just have to do all that. So whenever I do submit, I always try to submit early, but it is not necessarily in my nature. So yeah, sorry. I guess that's all I got to say.
I think I submitted pretty early this time because I was just afraid of missing it. I was like, if I don't just submit it, even if it's not near as good as it could be, I'll just do it now and get it over with so I don't forget. And I can always come back and edit before it's done or whatever. Maybe they come back and review them. If they already kind of reviewed it when it's all final, then I assume they probably reread them if they got edited.
Oh yeah, the edit. I forgot you could edit them.
I think you can. I didn't end up editing, so I don't.
You can because they give you feedback before, like you're saying.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That gives you opportunity to make adjustments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
I went back when I submitted because it shows all my previous submissions from I think it starts at 2016. And 1 year I submitted like 7 talks.
Dang.
I got in that year, but I had so much time.
Yeah, it's funny. Like now I look at it and I'm like, I barely have enough time to write the proposal. Like as long as I do something that is very related to stuff I do day to day, then I can give a talk pretty easily and talk for a half hour, whatever. Isn't it 30 minutes?
25, I think.
Something like that.
No? Did I just make that up? Maybe. I made that up, maybe. Yeah.
Something around there. But yeah, that's hard enough to do all that and then to make slides and whatever else. And yeah, it's quite a bit of work, Yeah.
Yeah, I usually submit, but this year I was like, I don't know. When I thought about it, I was like, I was around some of the speakers at RubyConf and I was like, I don't want to just be stressed the whole conference. Like if it was on the last day or something like that, and I don't want to be stressed leading up to it. And it's in my nature to avoid stress. So I just kind of want to go and enjoy myself this year.
Yeah. Well, at least the first talk spot's open. So if you do want to just get it over with, you got
throw my hand in.
So the last time I spoke was at RubyConf 2017 and the fire alarm went off during my talk. And
because you were spitting flames.
Just
fire. You can fire on the
fire.
beat.
There was
What was your mixtape that year?
He's dropped a rhyme and it just went the whole place.
I'm scared to make a joke because I'm sure my terminology is outdated and Andrew will drop a boomer. So no, there was a lot of mass chaos though, because people didn't know if it was real or not. And so there's 3 minutes of me being like, and then somebody's like, just keep going. So I kept going. And then it was a false alarm, obviously. And so somebody like stood up in the middle, like after me continuing, is like, there's a fire. I don't know why everyone's still here. And just yelled that from back of the room. And I was like,
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
You're like,
Is that a crime?
why are you still here?
I asked con freaks to leave in all the chaos. So like if you watch it, I don't think there's any edits in that part.
Now I want to go see that on, I assume it's still on YouTube or something.
It is. I think it's on my website under talks.
Nice.
We'll get a link. As someone whose house is caught on fire, I would just like to say to the audience listening, if the fire alarm is going off, you should immediately rise and exit.
That's probably not a bad idea.
We're not lawyers, or this is not legal advice.
I think 60% stayed probably.
Dang. You're
There
going
was-
down with the ship.
Well,
They wanted to hear what you were about to say.
So I'm looking at my monitor right now, talking to y'all. I'm on stage, right? If I look to my left, there's 4 fire exits. So I'm like,
Okay. That is some missing information. Yeah.
if this hits the fan, I think all the people in this room could safely get out these 4 doors pretty quickly. So
Yeah, that's a very reasonable expectation. I was in a swim meet and the fire alarm went out. It was December. And I got out of the pool due to the fire alarm in a
God.
Speedo
checks out.
in December.
Do you have any pictures of that?
Me outside that day? No, I don't.
In December in a Speedo, just waiting for the fire alarm to stop?
No, I still have pictures of my swim years, but no, not of that. I didn't have my phone. I had nothing. They pulled me out of the water.
That sounds like some kind of expression when someone gets pulled through a tough life event. They pulled me out of the water.
Yeah, they pulled me out of the water into the cold, into the darkness.
Okay. Well, lost me on that. I was trying to really make this an uplifting episode, but
Yeah, I know. But I can't let that happen. So here we are.
well, anything else you guys want to chat about?
I don't know.
Well, during this episode, we'll be in Vegas. So what are we going to do in Vegas?
We're going to the Neon Museum.
Yes. And what is that for the listeners?
That is a bunch of old neon lights from Vegas signs. So if a building gets torn down or a company rebrands, these signs get donated and this nonprofit restores them, or at least they can't restore it. It's too expensive. They'll at least kind of set it up in their tour. And we're doing a walking tour at night. So there's a guide with you. The times I've been, what it's been like is it's set up kind of from oldest to newest. So you kind of get a history of even before Las Vegas, the area of like some of the first casinos, signs, stuff like that. It's a 45-minute tour. It's one of my favorite things to do in Vegas.
I'm excited.
It's near Old Town Vegas. They call it downtown Fremont Street. So figure we can mosey on over there after and explore. I don't know if I was telling you this or I was telling Andrea, but Horseshoe on Fremont Street, you can take a picture with $1 million.
$1 million? I wanted to take a picture with $1 million. And then I'm going to use this as my Tinder picture. Not actually. That was a joke. I did remember one thing. Earlier, we were talking about missing indexes or things that could be indexed. There's a gem called LOL DBA. I've used it in the past. It scans your models and it'll list columns that should be indexed, and it can even generate the migration. And you shouldn't necessarily you should obviously look at it and make the decision for yourself whether what it says does need to be indexed, but it can definitely get you pretty far and give you some hints.
I think I've come across that. I haven't used it, but I like that idea. It's pretty good.
There's another one that I can't remember the name of at all. I can't remember the name. I know it was like a really weird name, so I'm probably not going to be able to find it. But it was kind of in the same vein as LOL DBA. It was doing something like scanning for foreign keys that could be like indexed and things like that. So yeah, there's stuff out there to help you with this stuff. And there's Derailed Benchmarks, I think, from Sheems is something you can use for testing performance. There's all sorts of stuff. So there's also free tools out there because we were talking about K6 a lot, which was really dope to use, but there are free options too.
Yeah, I know Derailed Benchmarks are really good for benchmarking stuff like that. So That's definitely one to look into. I don't think I've used it, but I know I looked into it a while back and probably should revisit. That seems like a good one for a screencast.
Yeah.
Schneem's a good one for a screencast.
The Schneem's cast.
Schneem's cast trademark. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Do you guys get updated on the latest Rails versions that Raphael released?
Believe so.
I didn't ever.
We did.
Did you look at the changelog? Was there anything?
I did.
There was a vulnerability in one.
One was a vulnerability release. The other one was patch updates. So there were no action mailer changes. I went through all of them this morning with Seb because I thought I had like a conniption this morning. Seb got to see one of my first meltdowns. So I had this test and it was failing. It was on Rails 7. I was trying to make it work on Rails 7. And I did not understand this error because it was saying there was a constant. That constant was not there. And I was at the point looking through gems that we had to see if that constant was anywhere. Had yet to find it. It made no sense. So I'm over here losing it a little bit. And then I rebased the branch after Andrea had updated Rails. And I forgot to run bundle with the special command to make sure it uses the next Rails version, uses Rails 7. So it used Rails 6 and I reran the test and it passed. And I started losing my mind because I was like, how did a patch version of Rails fix this test? It has to be in the changelog. So I went through all the changelog. There's a action cable thing that was kind of interesting where something about unsubscribing, a better promise connection for unsubscribing. You'll have to look. I don't remember the exact
Oh, is that the Safari bug or whatever related to that?
I think so.
Didn't they
Yeah, it was
also,
like,
they also released a Firefox autocomplete off
yes.
nonsense too.
Yeah, they did that. There was some active record changes. There weren't that many changes in the other libraries, but there were several active record changes and there was action cable and a few changes in action pack.
Yeah, nice.
I think that was the majority.
Shout out to Raphael for being the custodian of Rails and keeping those releases going and everything.
Yep.
That is very much appreciated. There's so many like
Aaron for the security release.
So many of those little bug fixes and things, and just so many ridiculous amounts of PRs to keep up. That's why whenever Taylor or somebody from the Laravel team screenshots that they have 0 open issues across all their repositories, I'm like, how is that possible? I don't know. There's some of those that are just hard to like, it's a good idea, but it's not implemented right. And we can't merge it. We'd like to maybe merge it. Somehow those things get shuffled through and done or whatever on Laravel, or they're quick to close things or something like that. It's impressive how they keep up with it because it is a thankless job. So shout out to Raphael and all that hard work. But yeah, anyways.
Still a thankless job because you never said thank you. You just said shout out. So.
Yeah. I got to keep it thankless.
But it's not a shout out list job.
No, it's not a shout out list job.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you and everyone else on the core.
Very much.
And I appreciate everyone who's no longer on core this week.
Yes, absolutely.
Very, very much appreciate all the work they've done. And
yeah, we couldn't be here without them. So huge thank you to them. And yeah, all their contributions and inspiration and whatever. They've done a lot for us.
Yep, and coding tricks that I get to read from.
Yeah. Things we shouldn't be teaching Andrew.
Yes. Too much power.
Well, I think that's it for this week.
Let's get right off in the sunset, partners.
On that note.
All right. Well, it's been fun.
Yep. See you guys.
Had a good run. Bye.